Of course, we want to come to an agreement.
Ultimately with Ukraine, but right now it's just practically impossible. It's impossible legally.
Vladimir Putin publicly stated today that he refuses to stop the war against Ukraine until Russia achieves all of its declared goals, which have increased today. And most importantly, Putin stated that it's currently impossible to legally sign a peace agreement, since it supposedly wouldn't be recognized at the international level, and that's why he's ready to continue the war. During his speech in Bishkek today, Putin stated that Russia will stop military actions in Ukraine only if the Ukrainian army leaves the territories it currently occupies. In other words, they would need to fully withdraw from the 4 Ukrainian regions Russia has illegally claimed as its own. And immediately after that, Putin stated that for a peace agreement, Ukraine would also have to hold referendums in all the occupied territories. Only then can negotiations to end the war begin. As you know, referendums can't happen during wartime, so Putin is just manipulating. Putin also echoed Russian propaganda, claiming Russia is prepared to fight until the last Ukrainian. Well, he blamed Europe for the war, claiming that according to him they are stealing money from this war. And Putin also threatened the West with consequences if Russian frozen assets are confiscated in Europe. And at the end, Putin cynically stated that, in general, he agrees for Donald Trump's peace plan to become the basis for a future peace agreement. In general, we will analyze all of today's statements by the dictator Putin in this episode. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, write any comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link is in this video's description. And if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. I would appreciate any support from you. So today, Putin essentially refused to end the war. And I'm curious, how many more times is Donald Trump willing to endure such humiliation from the Kremlin dictator? The fact is, right now his special representative Steve Witkoff is heading to Moscow to negotiate a peace plan that, according to him, could lead to peace. And that same Witkoff, just like his boss Donald Trump, insisted that Putin wants peace more than ever before. Witkoff hasn't even reached Moscow, but they're already telling him there won't be peace, regardless of what he and Dmitriev plan. They're just laughing at Trump in the Kremlin. What's happening? Trump was assured that their peace plan is a wonderful document that will definitely bring peace, as long as Ukraine accepts it unconditionally. But today, in Bishkek, Putin declares that Russia will stop military actions in Ukraine only if the Ukrainian army leaves Zenit. Based on the military actions, military support is needed. Penelope Podlezhashchiani Tayogov and the Ukrainians in the fall. But as for the involvement of Ukrainians, it went differently. Then the command of the troops ended control, I've suggested Federflucht. I hope the employers will respond. Based on Putin's statement, even a full withdrawal of the armed forces of Ukraine from regions claimed by the Kremlin as Russian won't fully end the war. It doesn't matter anyway. The thing is, Putin further stated that Russia wants to reach an agreement with Ukraine, but legally, it is not possible right now. According to Putin, only the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine has the right to extend its powers under martial law, but the president does not. Quote, "It is pointless to sign documents with the Ukrainian leadership. They made a strategic mistake when they were afraid to go to elections." That is, Putin is directly saying that anything at all can be written in the peace plan. But he will find reasons not to stop the war, because Putin himself knows that without the war, his regime will simply collapse. But that's not all. In the peace plan, there was also a point from Witkoff and Dmitriev that stated the occupied territories of Ukraine would effectively come under Russian control, but legally they would not be recognized as Russian by the international community. And supposedly, if Ukraine had agreed to the entire peace plan, it would have stopped the war, and the occupied territories would be considered occupied, not Russian. And again, I'll repeat that we Americans were assured that if we accepted this peace plan unconditionally, the war would definitely end. But today Putin says that de facto recognition is not enough for him, he needs de jure recognition. And then he explains why. After all, if the international community does not recognize these territories as Russian, Putin is quite justified. By the way, he fears that Ukraine might reclaim these territories by military means in the future, since it would be considered the return of Ukraine's legitimate territories. And now, listen carefully, really carefully, to what Putin has to say about this. And this explains a lot and shows why no peace plan here
will work. We need our decisions to be internationally recognized by the main international players. That's all. And that matters, because it's one thing when decisions are recognized like this. And let's say certain territories are under Russian sovereignty. And in case of a violation of the agreement, it would be considered an attack on the Russian Federation, with all the resulting retaliatory measures from Russia. Or will it be perceived as an attempt to reclaim territory that rightfully belongs to Ukraine? These are different things, and that's why, of course, we need recognition, but not from Ukraine today. I hope that in the future we will be able to come to an agreement with
Ukraine. Putin adds that, in his view, peace is impossible without elections and a referendum in Ukraine, where he believes Ukrainians should vote to cede territory to the occupier. And this is a dead end. Donald Trump's peace plan stated that elections should be held 100 days after the peace agreement is signed. And that seemed perfectly reasonable from a legal and political point of view. But Putin also says that this doesn't suit him. But the truth is that during a war, no one is going to hold any elections. Well, later Putin stated that Russia is ready to fight, as he put it, until the last Ukrainian. According to the Russian dictator, those in the West who want to keep stealing money are the ones calling to continue the fighting until the last Ukrainian. Well, and by the way, he also mentioned money, the bald one. The dictator stated that if the West confiscates the frozen Russian assets, there will be some consequences. And you know, I'm curious to see Donald Trump's face. After all, Putin believes, as he stated, that the results of the negotiations between Ukraine and the United States in Geneva could serve as the basis for future peace agreements. Quote, got it. They decided among themselves that all these 28 points should be divided into 4 separate components. All of this was passed on to us. So Putin, excuse me, is just laughing in Trump's face, and he says, listen, half of these points are impossible to implement. Even if the Ukrainian armed forces leave Donbass, I'll still keep fighting. I want legal recognition of these territories as Russian and for the world to acknowledge them as such. Let Ukraine hold elections, referendums, and so on before a peace agreement. And then, in general, it's not really convenient for me as president to sign with him. I won't sign with him because it's supposedly legally worthless. Basically, well, in short, half of your peace plan points are nonsense. You can go with them, but I still won't stop the war. He then says, well, overall, I'm not refusing to negotiate. Well, if the White House wants to propose a peace plan, then I'm basically okay with it. So, you see, it's just a mockery in Trump's face. And finally, according to Putin, in a possible agreement, Russia is ready to put in writing a promise not to attack Europe. Quote, for us, it sounds ridiculous. Really, we never intended to anyway. But if they want to hear it from us, well, let's put it in writing. No problem. Yeah, there's actually nothing funny about it, because the whole world already understands perfectly well what a Russian is. It's a deceitful creature that, as soon as it opens its mouth, immediately lies. Right before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the entire Kremlin leadership and Putin himself were shouting with their filthy mouths that they weren't going to attack. And really, it's ridiculous. It's the West that's stirring everything up. There won't be any attack on Ukraine. In the end, they attacked. Well, that's the whole essence of this creature called a Russian. And let me remind you that the original United States plan of 28 points, which, according to Reuters, was based on a wish list handed over by the Kremlin after Crimea, was reduced by a third. After the Ukrainian-American negotiations, Kyiv rejected 3 key provisions that Moscow insisted on. These are the reduction of the size of the armed forces of Ukraine, the refusal to join NATO, and the complete surrender of Donbass. Zelensky hoped, to discuss sensitive issues with Trump after all, but so far, let's say, he hasn't invited him to Washington. Well, as you understand, at the moment there is nothing at all that would make Putin reconsider his goals and abandon his key demands. And let's be honest, because of the corruption of Donald Trump's administration, and Putin feels more confident than ever, and he is sure that he just needs to give Donald Trump more time to put pressure on Ukraine so that Ukraine finally admits it can't win and must negotiate on Putin's well-known terms. Well, as we can see, that's exactly what Trump's team is trying to do right now. That's why I really don't understand right now why Trump's envoy Witkoff is flying to Moscow to meet with Putin. For what? What is he planning to discuss there? That's the open question. It's obvious. Why? So publicly, Putin says, your plan is nonsense. I'm not going to do anything that you've written there. But Witkoff still goes to some negotiations anyway. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like.